Hi, my name's Brett Reed. I thought I would make this video to share with you my experience of ProEFI and the Pro 112 plug-and-play ECU. If you're in a position where I was 12 months ago and are considering an aftermarket ECU for your car, you might find my experience useful when making a decision as to what ECU to get. I live in Perth, Western Australia, and 18 months ago I bought a 2001 Porsche 911 Turbo, which has been set up and used for tarmac rally. A little while after I bought the car, I got a tune flashed to the stock ECU, and in the process they damaged the ECU, and I was then in a situation where I needed to replace it. I priced up replacing it with a new stock ECU, and it was clear that for not much more, I could fit an aftermarket ECU, which would give me more tuning capability. So after doing what I thought was a reasonable amount of research, I chose the ProEFI 112 plug-and-play ECU. 1 year later, and after dealing with never-ending quality issues and spending way more than I expected on trying to get the ECU installed and tuned, I've ditched the ProEFI ECU and I'm now fitting a Motec. So when I was considering which ECU to get, I looked at all the options that I could find. When I looked at a Motec option, they were very upfront in saying that they didn't have an off-the-shelf setup solution and that the install and setup of one of their ECUs in my car would take some time. I reviewed all the stuff ProEFI had posted on YouTube about their ECUs, and there's also YouTube videos about the owner of ProEFI, Jason Siebel's 911 Turbo, that he's fitted a Pro 112 plug-and-play ECU. But one of the things that influenced me was that ProEFI said that they had just established an Australian dealer. I then spoke to the Australian dealer, and he assured me that from his experience of fitting a range of different ECUs over 20 years of working in this field, that he was very impressed with the ProEFI ECU. I also spoke to the marketing manager of ProEFI in Arizona, and he assured me that they were keen on having their product in a race car in Australia. He told me that their Australian dealer was fully trained in the ECU, and the fitting of the plug-and-play ECU would be fast and easy. So what I was hearing sounded okay, plus the ProEFI had several features that were very attractive to me. And so if you go off what you see online and talking to ProEFI, it's easy to get the impression that this is a quality product at a good price that is well supported. Unfortunately, I found it to be anything but that. So there are multiple problems that we have had with the ECU. These have to do with the instructions, but also quality problems, especially with the plug-and-play harness, and also dealing with ProEFI as a company and Jason Siebel's in particular. So the ECU arrived at the end of March last year, and that was 1.5 months after I ordered it. They didn't tell me at the time that the harness was out of stock and that there would be a delay. They simply took the order, took my money, and then failed to communicate, and took numerous efforts, numerous instances on my part, contacting them to find out what the issue was. The difficulty of dealing with ProEFI was made even worse by the fact that just as the ECU was arriving into Australia, the Australian dealer tells me that he's going into hospital to have major surgery, and he's not going to be available. He's going to be out of action for quite some time, an unspecified period of time, in fact. So when the ECU arrives, I go through it with my techs that are going to do the install. And we unpack it and we look at the individual components, and then we start to see that the instructions that are with each of the components just don't relate to the 112 ECU at all. They're only instructions for the 28 and the 48 versions of their ECU. How they can ship a product without instructions like this is just amazes me, and clearly they're having they're just having a real laugh at their customers' expense. So the only instructions that are there that relate to the Pro 112 are some very basic pinout diagrams on single sheets of paper, and these are far less than what we expected or actually needed. Later we found out that we should have got another pinout diagram, this one here is shown, but that was not supplied. Although Jason Siebels was adamant in subsequent emails, continuing to rant on about how this had been supplied. It was pretty clear as we continued to go through or work with this unit that there was a whole range, there was a number of things that hadn't been supplied. So what we got was a bunch of components with lots and lots of plug-in points, things that needed to be connected. There was no instructions that said that connect this plug with this unit and this piece with this. And when we queried that with ProEFI, we were told that it was clearly, very obvious, and that the comment was made to me that clearly my technicians were incompetent if they couldn't work it out. The equipment that's supplied is just deficient instructions, and then we actually find, after they've been telling me that my people are incompetent, that they didn't supply one of the Y harnesses that they should. There's multiple plugs on that harness that are missing, or multiple plugs and that harness is missing. When we try to work out what goes with what, there's no way we can work it out. It's like having a jigsaw puzzle that firstly you don't have a picture of the jigsaw you're trying to put together, and secondly there are major pieces of the jigsaw puzzle missing. No wonder we were struggling at our end. Eventually we send enough information to the guys in the US that they come back with an email and acknowledge that they've screwed up, that they just haven't loaded the ECU out of Arizona correctly when they sent it, and there's no way that we're going to be able to communicate with it correctly here in Perth. So we then then the solution is we pack it up and we send it over to the dealer in Queensland, and he's going to work on it there. He actually has it for a month and he messes around with it, and it's pretty clear in that time that he doesn't know what he's doing on the ECU. He's not trained, despite assurances that I had when I bought the ECU from him and from Arizona that they had a properly set up dealership network here with trained people. He's not trained, and he's sending emails back to ProEFI in the US asking questions, really fundamental questions about how the system works. The first issue with the system is that it is definitely not plug and play. Even without the significant number of quality issues that we have had with this product that we have had to fix, it is still a system that needs a lot of configuration and is not advertised that way. It's promoted as a plug and play system, but this is just totally misleading. The standard approach from ProEFI, and especially Jason Siebels, whenever there is an issue and the system is not performing as it should, he immediately blames either the car and the wiring, or he blames the technicians that have worked on it and said, well, obviously they haven't installed it as they're supposed to. There's a problem with the installation. We've not found one problem with the installation. There's not been an issue that's where we haven't wired it once we have actually found out what the wiring details are, which has been a drama in itself. We've not had a problem wiring the car up once we've been told what needs to be done, but we have had numerous problems with the plug and play harness and the equipment that's been supplied by ProEFI. As we've tried to sort out problems where the the ECU system hasn't been performing as it should, ProEFI have blamed the wiring and have had us fit resistors to power wires on the OEM circuit. They've also had us rewire the main power relay driver, and this proved to not be a problem, so then we had to put the wiring back to as it originally was. So this is the picture that ProEFI provides showing what the plug-and-play harness actually looks like. As you can see, all of the individual pins are insulated. And this is what ProEFI actually supplies with the kit. As you can see, the pins are held in place by glue, and on the plug that we received, 2 of the pins were glued so that they were touching and shorting out. You can see the area here marked in red where we have had to repair that. The next problem we have with the ECU is that we can't flash a replacement file to the ECU when we need to. We've got Chris Delgado from Texas logging in on TeamViewer, working with it. He's an expert in the system, and no matter what we do, we can't flash a file. There's clearly something wrong with the system. At that point, Chris tells us to take the ECU out of the car and send it back to him in the US, where he is going to check it out. Shortly after we send it, I get this email from Chris where he says he thinks he's identified what the problem is. When I talk to Chris on the phone, he says that he was working on a GTR on another installation and had the same problem. And it was to do with the drivers on the wideband controllers and an incompatibility problem with the software. The issue there is that we hadn't sent the wideband controllers back to Chris in the US, so he wasn't able to test those. So when we got the ECU back and reinstalled it in the car, I asked Chris whether the problem was sorted, and he said he didn't know. We were going to have to test that problem in the car, but firstly we decided to get the car on the dyno and get the tune set up to try and get the car running properly, and then we'd address any issue with being able to flash files into the ECU. So we get the car on the dyno and we're trying to do the tune. We find that we're not getting any boost control signal. So we do a check on the circuit and find there's no problem with the boost control solenoid and the way that's connected up. So then we check the plug and play harness, and to our absolute shock, we find that the circuit for the boost controller, which is supposed to be on plug A and pin E3, doesn't even exist. It's not even wired up. You can see in this photo where it's marked, there's just a total gap there. The obvious question here is, how could you possibly have the ECU for a month and supposedly be testing it and not discover that the boost controller circuit isn't even wired up? At this point, the technicians that have been working on the system are just in fits of laughter. They can't believe what a joke the whole system is and the continual problems that just keep coming up. So at this point, I consider my options. And I'm loath to just walk away from this ECU. I've got so much money and time invested in it, and it is close. I think I'll give it one more go. ProEFI's advice is that we just need to reassign that pin from where it is spliced onto another part of the harness and pin it up to the E3 plug where it's supposed to go. So we wait for pins to be sent from the US, from ProEFI in the US. We get those and we pin up that wire correctly as it's supposed to be. But then that just introduces other problems. When we start the car up, you turn it off with the key and it won't stop. The only way to stop the car is then with the kill switch. So that, for me, is the final straw. The situation I'm in is that I have an ECU that has continuing problem after problem. I don't have technicians in Perth where I am who want to have anything to do with it. Everyone who's had done any work on it is just over it. And the supposed dealer in Australia is not available and doesn't know the ECU. There isn't a dealer network here that is of any effective use. But the other thing that I've come to realise in this whole journey by going on some of the forums and even on the ProEFI Facebook page is that I'm not the only person that's been experiencing this. Here's a message from one of the online forums with another 996 Turbo owner from the US, and some of the comments he had. He went through similar problems with pieces of equipment missing, wiring just missing, no instructions. I hope this information is useful for people that are considering getting a ProEFI ECU. I would certainly recommend against it. There's just been so many problems with this unit. I've persisted with it. All I wanted was an ECU that would do the job in my car. And I persisted with it, continued to spend money on this unit. And where I'm at now is I have no faith in what they've supplied. So I've asked for a refund. Jason Siebel has said flat out that he will not be providing a refund. So I thought I would let you know that's the nature of the ProEFI product. If you would want to take on one of their products after hearing this, well, good luck.